Hello my friends and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. When your own mass media reports on the enemy's success, that means the situation is bad, so you can't even hide it. So in this case we have US media reporting on the Russian successes in Bakhmut. Even the Ukrainians are reporting that, but in a very mild way. Nevertheless, we got Reuters and obviously the Russians reporting on the Wagner group's success in Bakhmut, which it seems like, according to these sources, that the Wagner units are advancing in Bakhmut. And the Ukrainian forces are retreated from Soledar already. But they retreated to save, they don't call it a retreat, like they didn't call a retreat the Azovstal steel plant surrender. But hey, nevertheless, let's get it on with this article first, which comes from Reuters. And it says that Russian-installed Donetsk chief says Wagner units making progress in Bakhmut. Reuters would not break this news or promote it unless that would have been verified, I'm guessing, or at least believe in the situation on the report from this Russia-installed chief in Donetsk. So this article comes from today, January 25, 2023. The Russian-installed governor of Ukraine's Donetsk region said on Wednesday that units of the Wagner conflict militia were advancing in the town of Bakhmut, with fighting taking place in previously Ukrainian-held neighborhoods. Reuters could not independently confirm the battlefield claim by Denis Pushilin, the Russian-imposed head of the regions, whose annexation was claimed by Moscow last September. Well, they couldn't verify it, but nevertheless they promote it. And I'm quoting, units in particular Wagner are advancing here in Artyomovsk. That is I think the Russian name of Bakhmut. So units in particular Wagner are advancing in Artyomovsk itself. TASS news agency quoted him as saying, using the Russian name for the town. And I'm quoting, fighting is already taking place in the outskirts and its neighborhoods that until very recently were held by the enemy, end quote, he said. Enemy being the Ukrainians, obviously. The area around Bakhmut has seen some of the most brutal fighting of the 11th month war. So far, its fate has high symbolic importance for both Russia and Ukraine, even though Western military analysts say the town, which had a pre-war population of around 70,000, has a little strategic significance. Well, yeah, they had little strategic significance, but they're fighting like crazy. They also said that, the same sources, that actually around Soledar and Bakhmut there is a communication hub that the Ukrainians are using, and therefore it is very important. On the same time, Soledar had and still has some salt mines that it can use to have soldiers and supposedly tanks with a length of about 100 miles, according to some articles that I read, and I made videos regarding that, where allegedly you can put tanks and military personnel over there. So let's see what else these guys are talking about in this article. So these guys jump here. Russia said earlier this month it had captured Soledar to the northeast and Klishchivka to the south, in advances for which Yevgeny Prigozhin's Wagner group claimed credit. Well, it's not only Russia that said this month it captured Soledar. I will make a video on how the Ukrainians report how they retreated from Soledar. They already said we got our troops out to save lives. That's how the story goes. RIA news agency quoted Pushilin as saying that taking Soledar had made it possible to block Ukrainian supply routes and control some areas from which Ukrainian forces had been launching retaliatory action. So it shows that at least they report in this article that indeed it is a strategic town, Bakhmut. I will use a Ukrainian name, and the fact that they're fighting for it like crazy, indicates that that's the case. Now let's go to the other article, which is a Russian article. It comes from Sputnik, and it's a very clear-cut, short article. This is right here, Sputnik International, and you have to go down here with all the news, but I just wanted to show you where it comes from so we don't have any issues with you know whom. Anyway, I like to show this so I cannot be accused of making up stuff. And even if I'm accused, if there's evidence, good, and there's no evidence so far. So here we have Wagner units are advancing in Artemovsk. Wagner units are advancing in Artemovsk, Bakhmut. Fighting is taking place both on the outskirts of the city and in neighborhoods that were recently held by the enemy. Denis Pushilin, acting head of DPR, said on Wednesday. According to him, tough fighting continues in Artemovsk. And I'm quoting, but units, particularly Wagner units, are advancing in Artemovsk itself, and fighting is already going on somewhere on the outskirts and in some neighborhoods that were recently held by the enemy, end quote, he told reporters. Artemovsk is located in the Kiev-controlled part of the DPR, north of the large city of Gorlovka, and is an important transport hub for supplying Ukrainian troops in Donbass. So we got this from these two sources. Basically is what Pushilin stated regarding the issue, the situation over there. I don't know if you noticed, at least I kept an eye on this. I haven't heard these terms used, Russian army. For whatever reason, I never, as of now, heard these guys, any of them, the Americans, the free media and the Ukrainian media or the Russian media, referring to the Russian troops as Russian army. Just look for it or pay attention, and if you found it, I guarantee you, you did not find it used, happily. Why is that? You can say, well, it's maybe improper. No, it's the Russian army. Remember who, let's say, when they refer to who got to Berlin, the Soviet army. They don't say Soviet troops. They don't say Soviet units. Usually it's the Soviet army. So I don't think they don't use the Soviet army just because they like the Russian army, because they like, to say Russian troops or something like that. So just pay attention. It's very interesting. And when you hear about successes, you hear about Wagner Group and their troops. You don't hear about the Russian army success. I wonder why. Well, my little theory is because the Russian army is not really much involved in that. I think it fights with that's why the Russian troops are fighting with the auxiliary forces like the Romans did and others in our history, where you have, for instance, mercenaries, private military companies, Wagner, however you want to call them. Then you have volunteers, and then you have troops from the newly liberated, occupied, however you want to look at the issue, from the DPR, LPR, and all those from Crimea. So those guys form those units, the Americans. Yeah, the Russians provide them with weapons, logistics, and everything else, and probably, certainly, with some military, which is personnel support. But they're not the main guys fighting over there, it seems like, because as I said, it's curious because I don't hear Russian army. I hear Russian troops and Russian units, and not that? Well, maybe we're going to find out. Definitely they are over there, but I wonder why they don't use it that way. Well, definitely, the Wagner group is advancing in Bakhmut. Now we'll find out in the next few days how deep they were going to get in, and how and if they will conquer it. And maybe, I don't know, the Ukrainians again are going to just leave Bakhmut to save lives. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.